This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, investors traded cautiously today as they assessed company valuations following a rapid rise in equities this month and the enduring pandemic in parts of Europe and the US. Now, MSCI's index of emerging market stocks rose 0.1% on the day, with Chinese stocks leading the advance after data showed that October profits at Chinese industrial firms rose. South Africa's JSE pretty muted today, but there was some positive activity in banks and diversified miners. The index for bank stocks extended its gains for a second day, up 1%, as First Rand says it experienced a better than anticipated recovery in the past 4 months. The index for basic resources stocks rose for a sixth day, as we saw gains in diversified miners counters weakness in gold and platinum companies. Now, also coming up on today's show, AstraZeneca to run new tests on its vaccine after doubts emerged on its efficacy. Zimbabwe bets on local procurement to boost its recovery in 2021. And we bring you the young Egyptian that has developed a robot to diagnose infection. Well, let's start off today's show with some vaccine news. AstraZeneca, the pharmaceutical company working with Oxford University to develop a COVID vaccine, is now promising to run a new series of tests. Now, just days after revealing their initial results from tests in the UK and Brazil, there are questions about the reported efficacy rates, which varied between 62 and 90%. Now, this stems from an error made during the testing, which led to a higher effectiveness rate. Here's CGTN's Ayolo Abdafid reporting.
Much of the UK government's economic optimism for 2021 rides on the back of a reasonably priced, effective knockout blow to COVID-19. This week's jubilation is now tempered, with AstraZeneca and Oxford University undertaking additional work on their potential vaccine. An error during testing led to half a dose being given initially, before a full dose a month later. But the error paid off. Researchers found that dose level resulted in the vaccine proving to be 90% effective in preventing COVID-19. But when 2 full doses were given in the same time frame, it had an efficacy rate of 62%.
I think we shouldn't be concerned or too puzzled by the fact that giving a small dose and then a bigger dose has a better effect than giving 2 large doses. The immune system behaves in very complicated ways in order to tolerate some things and yet react to others.
AstraZeneca is a multinational pharmaceutical company based in Cambridge. Its turnover last year was over $24 billion and has a portfolio of products for many major diseases. But questions are asked over its testing and the dosage error, something which also affected the value of its shares. That's forced AstraZeneca's chief executive to respond. Now that we've found, he says, what looks like a better efficacy, we have to validate this, so we need to do an additional study. AstraZeneca and its partner Oxford University promises the new research will be international. The UK government has reserved 100 million doses and has also bought about 40 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine, enough for roughly a third of the UK population. Despite the recent concerns, it's pushing on with regulatory approval of the AstraZeneca jab. The UK Prime Minister, for one, is hoping new tests will lead to less confusion for economic and social reasons.
We now have reason to hope that by spring, community testing and vaccines will combine to end this era of restrictions. But to get there, we must first navigate a hard winter when the burden on our NHS is heaviest.
The race to provide an effective vaccine will enable the return to some kind of social normality and to stimulate economic growth. There are likely to be some who will be cautious about the safety of a vaccine after only a few months of testing. Yolo David, CGTN, London.
Meanwhile, the African Union is working with member states to coordinate the purchase and delivery of COVID-19 vaccines. The World Health Organization says 3 vaccines are demonstrating high levels of efficacy. Now, the World Bank has announced it is offering $12 billion to assist the continent in vaccine acquisition. Well, CGTN's Coletta Wanjoy spoke to the Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention in Addis Ababa.
The light at the end of the COVID-19 tunnel is peeking through. Preliminary results from 3 vaccine candidates have shown incredible promise. But in Africa, there are concerns that citizens could be last in line after developed nations pre-ordered billions of doses. Being locked out would not only leave hundreds of millions vulnerable, but could have a wide-ranging impact on Africa's ability to recover and could lead to discrimination.
We are very concerned as a continent that once these vaccinations start in a developed world, there will be stringent conditions that says that you have to have a vaccine certificate in order to travel. And that will become, we've already seen some airlines indicating that once vaccines are available, they will need a vaccine certificate to travel.
The Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says the target is to immunize at least 60% of Africa's population. 3 contenders are being considered: the Moderna and the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccines from the United States and the AstraZeneca jab from the United Kingdom. Preliminary data from late-stage clinical trials has shown at least 90% efficacy in all of them. The African Union says it is in talks with the vaccine manufacturers through COVAX, a global initiative co-led by the World Health Organization to help ensure equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines. But the Africa CDC says there are other challenges beyond just a vaccine being available. According to World Health Organization, 40 African countries are still not fully ready for vaccine acquisition.
We have to look at the delivery part of this and say, well, if a vaccine was here today, in Africa today, how we will deliver it? I think the first 2 vaccines, that is the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine, require very stringent storage conditions. The Moderna vaccine requires about minus 20-something degrees Celsius storage and distribution. The Pfizer vaccine requires about minus 70. And these are all conditions that will make it very challenging for us as a continent to begin to access those vaccines in a timely fashion.
Apart from the COVAX initiative, which guarantees the continent 20% coverage for any vaccine produced, the AU has so far mobilized $12 million from the World Bank and $5 billion from the Afrexim Bank. With additional funds from individual member states, the AU aims to achieve the remaining 40% coverage required to keep the continent safe. In mid-December, the Africa CDC is meeting with all member states to discuss in detail, once vaccines are acquired, how there will be equitable distribution of the vaccines according to each country's needs. Coletta Wanjoy, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Well, let's head to Zimbabwe now. The country's economy is expected to grow by 7.4% in 2021 after a 4.1% contraction in 2020. Now, that's according to forecasts presented by the country's finance minister on Thursday. While presenting his 2021 national budget to Parliament, Professor Mthuli Ncube said the stability achieved over the last 2 years will spur the ambitious growth. Here's Farai Mwakutuya with the details from Harare.
The focus in 2021 will be on sustainable and inclusive growth driven by agriculture, mining and manufacturing. Players in the latter have welcomed local procurement measures that will prop up domestic industries.
I think one of the things we would also highlight as far as local procurement is concerned is that that needs to be followed up with the supportive instruments or enforcing instruments as quickly as possible to make sure that as much as is possible, everything that can be procured locally should be procured locally.
Rebates were extended for the dairy industry and fertilizer manufacturers, although more concessions are needed to level the playing field.
If we could have less and less duty on raw materials, because we are importing raw materials from countries that we have to compete with. We are then competing with imported products, imported finished products, some of them coming from countries that we are importing raw materials from.
The finance minister is planning to increase revenue by targeting previously untapped resources. A monthly presumptive tax has been prescribed for the informal sector, but the crucial question remains whether these predominantly survivalist operators can bear it, which could see some of them go further under the radar.
2021 is definitely going to be a tough year. The minister is actually looking to increase revenue collection against a shrinking economy. So it's going to be tough on business. So you'll see an increase in informalization, you'll see an increase in dollarization.
Relief for the formerly employed has been given through widened tax brackets and focus put on job creation.
We've seen the minister coming up with clear employment creation and poverty reduction annual targets in the national budget. And there's also a strong synchronity or complementarity between the national budget and also the national development strategy, which in my view, I think that's positive.
5.5% of GDP will be set aside to fund capital projects that will help bridge a debilitating infrastructure deficit. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Meanwhile, Fitch Ratings has revised Tunisia's outlook to negative from stable. It has, however, affirmed the long-term foreign currency issuer default rating at a B. Now, the negative outlook reflects a sharp deterioration in public finances and the impact of the COVID-19 shock. From Tunis, here is Adnan Shaushi with the details.
Tunisia's Minister of Economy, Finance and Investment Promotion declared that Fitch Ratings has taken into consideration the latest negative economic indicators during the pandemic.
Fitch Ratings have evaluated the public finances and the latest economic situation in Tunisia. We are aware of the challenges and we aim to improve the situation by taking seriously all the recommendations. Despite the global health and economic crisis, Tunisia aims to put in place structural economic reforms.
The ratings agency also noted that inflation in the North African state would average 5.6% in 2020-2021. It added that it projected the central government deficit to widen to 10.5% of GDP in 2020 from 3.3% in 2019.
Our top priority is to reduce the payroll expenditure, reduce the deficit, and boost the purchasing power of Tunisians while reducing inflation in order to face this difficult economic and health situation. We want to increase the competitiveness of SMEs which suffer due to the pandemic. The state wants strong companies which can increase jobs and revive the national economy.
Fitch Ratings projects economic growth will recover to 4% in 2021. The Tunisian government also expects the same positive growth. However, the Finance Commission at Parliament has warned the government that several local and external factors may hinder the achievement of this forecast.
The government and the rating agency's projections are too optimistic. It's impossible to reach a 4% growth in 2021 because the pandemic and the crisis will not end in December. The world is in fact expecting a third wave of COVID-19. Therefore, production in various sectors and export will not resume normally. This is completely unrealistic.
The finance minister forecasts a rise in gross domestic product GDP of 4%, investments of 17% and exports of 10%. Ali Kali believes that the current account deficit will be 8%, while the inflation rate will be closer to 5% in 2021.
The recent indicators provided by the Ministry of Economy, Finance and Investment Promotion show that reducing the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and improving the production of phosphates, oil and tourism could help boost growth in the next 12 months. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, Well, let's now take a look at our corporate headlines today. Kenyan sports betting firm SportsPesa may have become the country's second largest company by revenue. Now, the firm disclosed annual sales of over $1.3 billion, a sign of how popular sports gambling has become in Kenya. After paying out about $1.2 billion in winnings, the firm's profits are estimated to be in excess of $90 million. However, SportsPesa continues to face an existential threat in Kenya as it battles regulators over licensing and tax issues. And South Africa's industrial conglomerate Bidvest saw its shares climb over 3% today on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. That's after a trading update revealed that operating profits remained stable in the first 4 months of its new financial year. Now, new acquisitions and market share gains helped to offset the negative effects of COVID-19. CEO Mpumi Madisa says the group, whose interests span from cleaning services to freight management, maintained a healthy financial position through strong cash generation. And Lufthansa Cargo says it is ready to deliver COVID-19 vaccines around the world. The German carrier's cargo arm says it has spent months in dialogue with pharma companies and clients to be ready to store and deliver the vaccine when one becomes available. Now, one vaccine from Germany's BioNTech has complex and super cold storage requirements and it needs to be kept at minus 70 degrees Celsius or below. And finally, Chinese tech firm Baidu has held talks with Alibaba Group and Tencent Holdings over the sale of a stake in its video streaming service, Iqiyi. However, reports are that discussions have stalled over the valuation of about $20 billion demanded by Baidu. Now, Tencent, which first showed interest in June, believes the company is worth about half of that value. Considered China's equivalent to Netflix, Nasdaq-listed Iqiyi has a market capitalization of $16.4 billion, which values Baidu's 56.2% stake at about $9.2 billion. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are heading into a short break now, still to come on the show. Motorcycle ride-hailing app Safe Border exits Kenya. And Black Friday turns out to be another shopping frenzy in South Africa despite the depressed economy.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
Beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Uche Okoronkwo.
Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business. Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Well, let's go to Nigeria now. The country has made big gains on value-added tax returns in the third quarter of 2020. The West African nation earned over $1 billion from VAT, which is close to a 30% increase from the previous quarter. Now, this is as the economy struggled due to the COVID-19 downturn that, of course, has led to a plunge in crude prices and rising inflation. Here's CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reporting from Abuja.
Nigeria's Senate passed a finance bill to raise value-added tax from 5 to 7.5% 1 year ago. And the outcome of that decision is being felt now. According to the country's Bureau of Statistics, revenue from VAT increased by over 54% year-on-year to hit $1.12 billion. Though a significant increase, it's just a fraction of what the country needs.
The infrastructure requirement is so huge, and the debt service is just about over 2.5 trillion. So it's not much compared, given that it's only 20% of that VAT that the federal government gets. So it's still not substantial, but it helps. It helps because it's not just the federal government that is facing that fiscal stress, but also the state governments. Much of the increase that we saw ought to be on luxury goods. So there has to be increased compliance on luxury good items to generate more revenue. And of course, there are waivers of VAT for businesses employing less than earning less than 25 million naira turnover. And then, of course, there are so many food items that are exempt.
Nigeria is facing one of its toughest times. The West African country's earnings had been stifled by dwindling oil prices and exacerbated by the COVID-19-induced disruptions. The World Bank projects it could be facing its worst recession in more than 4 decades, and government has been looking to international lenders for more borrowing to boost the economy.
I'm really glad that we are catching up. The issue around debt sustainability is not because we are borrowing beyond our means or hitting any exceeding the benchmarks. It's the revenue side, our ability to maintain the service, and that's debt service to government revenue is the one that is over 50% to 60%, towards 60%. So this news of VAT being a substantial increase in the quarterly is a good news. 24
of 28 sectors recorded improved VAT remittances, including manufacturing, professional services, commercial and trading sectors. Economic watchers say the increase in VAT will help grow government's revenue. But in the face of dwindling oil revenue, Nigeria will have to intensify its diversification efforts in order to expand its income base. That would help the government spend its way out of a catastrophic economic downturn. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Now, the Ugandan ride-hailing startup Safe Border has closed operations in Kenya, citing the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Safe Border connects passengers to motorcycle riders through a mobile app. The app began in Uganda before spreading to Kenya and Nigeria in 2018. Here's Isabel Nakiria with more.
Safe Border has pulled out of the motorcycle taxi market in Kenya. The company says the coronavirus hit hard at a time when it was struggling to expand. Apart from ride-hailing, Safe Border was also connecting users to other online platforms like online markets, food delivery services, and financial transactions like airtime purchases.
A product like Safe Border depends on a lot of funds and a lot of raising of funds. Had to go through a very difficult situation because not every investor is willing to invest during this difficult moment. So we had to pull in because we didn't have, to be honest with you, we didn't have all the finances to continue running the company.
Kenya started easing lockdown measures about 4 months ago, but the movement of people remained low due to fears of catching COVID-19.
Around 4,000 motorcycle taxi drivers in Kenya have lost jobs following Safe Border pullout, and many of them had lost incomes during the lockdown and were struggling to cope.
Safe Border says it could not sustain the business because the market environment was uncertain, posing threats to its operations in Uganda and Nigeria. Kenya's economy is one of the fastest growing in East Africa. Safe Border says it enjoyed the competitiveness of the market and learned lessons.
It's a very difficult decision that we had to make, but we had to make it to be able to save Safe Border because the economy is real tough, the situation is real tough. A lot of movement of people have been reduced. You know, when people are not going to churches, when people are not going to bars, when people are not going to school and stuff like this, you get to realize when people are now working from home and all meetings are happening from Zoom, you get to realize that movement of people is very, very limited. That means our business transaction will always continue to be low.
The pandemic has sparked many innovations, and tech entrepreneurs say the only way to stay in business is to learn to be creative.
We have to look into things around digital transformation. We need to skill as many youth as possible, equip them with the necessary digital skills and tools that they'll need to be competitive moving forward. We need to address challenges around access to necessary training on business development.
For now, Safe Border will focus business in Uganda and Nigeria as it strategizes on whether it will return to Kenya when things improve. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
Now, the ride-hailing app Safe Border pulling out of Kenya has rendered hundreds jobless, including call center operators in the country. Meanwhile, thousands of motorcycle riders registered on the platform will have to seek work elsewhere now. Here's CGTN's Enoch Sikolia reporting from Nairobi.
Across Nairobi, one cannot fail to spot a motorcycle taxi donning an orange reflector jacket and matching helmet. But a few months from now, these flashes of orange with a Safe Border logo may be a rare sight. The motorcycle hailing app has exited the Kenyan market. Walter Obinya joined the app when it expanded to Kenya in 2018. He recalls a bonus structure in place in the early days.
Whenever you rendered services to 3 people in a day, you would earn a bonus of $3. 5 people, you would get $5, and if you ferried 10 people, you get $10.
Obinya says anyone joining the app was taken through thorough safety and customer care training. Riders were kitted out with reflector jackets and helmets for themselves and their customers. He says that focus on safety endeared them to customers.
Many people would come to the stage looking for anyone with Safe Border helmet. He or she would then make a request specifically targeted at you.
Safe Border said the decision to exit Kenya was due to the effect of the coronavirus pandemic, but riders from Kenya dispute that reason. Many say the app was struggling even before the pandemic struck, facing off with competitors like Uber and Bolt.
They started reducing rates for fares, and so riders started leaving the app, and they never listened to our plight. Despite our complaints and protests, the money we were getting became little as the app sought to make clients happy at our expense.
In recent years, border borders have become a popular mode of transport in Kenya. At the same time, it has provided employment opportunities for young Kenyans, and the hole left behind by Safe Border in the industry will hopefully be quickly filled. Enoch Sikolia, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
And heading to South Africa now, despite the tough economic climate in the country, Black Friday turned out to be another shopping frenzy. People queued at some places waiting for big retail stores to open to get their hands on specials. Here's Sumitra Naidu reporting.
Black Friday, usually held between October and November every year, normally kicks off the festive shopping season. It was no different this year despite COVID-19.
We came here to buy our kids Christmas clothes as well as New Year's. We came to Woodmead because they have big sales and we save compared to Rustenburg. We came from Rustenburg.
We got here last night at 9 p.m. and slept at the petrol station. The security guard told us we couldn't queue at that time as it was too early, so we went to the engine petrol station and slept in the car.
It's too early to tell whether Black Friday was as successful as previous years, but retailers are banking on the day, having gone all out with advertising specials.
So we've seen
a steady flow of customers coming in and buying the usual products that they normally buy during Black Friday. Last year we ran it over 5 days, which we called it Black 5 Days, and this year we're running it as Black Friday extended. We've taken into account the safety of our staff and our customers, and that is why we ran it for over a longer period so that we can really comply with the COVID protocols.
Consumer behavior in South Africa changed significantly this year because of COVID-19 and the lockdown. There's been a massive uptick in online shopping and overall e-commerce.
We've been doing very well on online. We've seen a very good growth. We've actually been growing from the start of the extended Black Friday. We've been seeing just above 80% growth on the online, and the customers have really made use of our online, I think because also of the COVID-19.
Some consumers, though, are old school and also look forward to shopping as a day out.
I prefer viewing the product because some of the stuff that we buy online, we get that it's not actually the product that we're looking for in terms of quality. We're from like Mututlung near Brits, and we don't have any sort of a retail stores, so we like expected to save a bit of more money. That's why we're here. That's why we drove all the way.
It's been a tough year. South Africa is still in a deep recession that has been compounded by COVID, and unemployment is at a record high. Getting a good discount on something needed is a big deal. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
You're watching Global Business Africa. We have lots more business news for you after the short break. Still to come. Workers in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates to face new labor laws. And tourism in the United States commercial capital of New York is down by 2/3 due to the coronavirus.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Let's now recap other headlines at this hour. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says his government will protect civilians in the northern region of Tigray. He made the comment in a meeting with African Union envoys on Friday, but the statement issued after the meeting with former Presidents Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia, Joaquim Chissano of Mozambique, and Kgalema Motlanthe of South Africa made no mention of talks with regional forces. And certain rescue operations have been underway for around 40 miners trapped underground at a mine in Bindura town, some 70 kilometers from Zimbabwe's capital, Harare. At least 6 miners have so far been pulled out of the mine after it collapsed on Wednesday. Now, the rescue efforts are being slowed down by underground water and disrupted by other miners who are attempting to get into the shaft. And there's been much excitement in South Africa around the discovery of a skull belonging to a species that lived around the same time as ancient humans. The cranium was found at the Cradle of Humankind, which is a World Heritage Site. It could provide many critical answers to existence and how modern humans came about. And finally, Uganda has unveiled a pair of tigers from South Africa at a zoo in Entebbe. The 2- and 3-month-old tigers were brought from the Mystic Monkeys and Feather Zoo in South Africa in exchange for 25 monkeys from Uganda. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. Now, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have announced plans that will change the working environment for expatriates. Saudi Arabia is considering a change in its labor laws that gives more control to employees. The UAE is set to relax a number of laws that impact living standards of workers there. Here's Jacob Greaves reporting.
Right now in Saudi Arabia, foreign workers can't switch jobs or even leave the country without their employer's permission. But Riyadh says that's going to change, with plans to ease contractual restrictions in a bid to lure more talent to the country. Meanwhile, in the UAE, conservative Islamic laws are set to be overturned, allowing expats to drink alcohol without a licence and unmarried couples to live together.
It's no coincidence that we're seeing these measures announced now, because obviously they reflect the economic challenges that Saudi Arabia and the UAE have faced in the last few years that have been exacerbated by COVID, and a realisation that the private sector has to flourish, and that part of that story is going to be obviously expats living here, being happy living here, wanting to stay, and obviously foreign direct investment into the country.
The changes in the UAE are also expected to include tougher punishment for honour killings, whilst divorce or inheritance will be settled by an expat's home nation's law rather than local Sharia courts.
It comes amid warnings from the IMF that the UAE economy could shrink by 6.6% this year, and amid concern of an expat exodus, a grouping that makes up over 85% of the population here.
Some prominent Emiratis have gone on record as saying that they might expect to see the population shrink by, almost double-digit levels this year. We wouldn't necessarily think it's that extreme.
For the more conservative Saudi Arabia, the labour law changes could be comprehensive, giving more power to employees to choose their job and, as a result, incentivising companies to improve working conditions.
You move away from your traditional labour-intensive, low-wage, low-skilled, semi-skilled business models that have been very dominant in the region, mainly, but in Saudi also a lot. The fact that the workers retain now the ability to make their own choices and pursue better employment opportunities is going to change the dynamics of the relationship between the employer and the worker totally.
But these changes won't begin until March 2021. Even then, they're largely bringing Saudi Arabia up to speed with other Gulf countries such as Bahrain and the UAE. The region relies on a low-income migrant workforce in sectors such as construction. Rights groups have consistently raised concern about their treatment, particularly amid the financial impact of COVID-19.
The degree that these moves improve Saudi Arabia's reputation on this front and also attract new workers to the country depends in large part on how these changes are implemented in practice. There are still a number of informal methods that can be used to take advantage of vulnerable workers. This happens in Saudi Arabia, in the Gulf, and indeed across the globe.
For the Gulf's 2 largest economies, a legacy of COVID-19 could also be improved conditions for foreign workers. Jacob Greaves, CGTN in Dubai.
Now, China says it will impose temporary anti-dumping measures on wine imports from Australia. Under a World Trade Organization agreement, a product is considered dumped if it is sold to other countries at a price below the cost price from the exporting nation. Now, starting on Saturday, importers of Australian wine will be taxed additional duties of up to 212%. Australia has slammed the measure as grossly unfair. It isn't clear how long the measure will last for, but Beijing says the decision was based on Chinese laws and international conventions and called on the Australian side to respect China's interests. Meanwhile, the 10th edition for the Bauma International Trade Fair has concluded in China. The world's leading construction machinery trade fair was held at the Shanghai New International Expo Center. More than 3,000 exhibitors from 93 nations around the world participated in the event. Now, a series of new products and technologies were demonstrated, including the unmanned excavator, intelligent excavator with voice recognition, and the world's first all-terrain crane with remote intelligence control.
Bauma China 2020 is quite different given the current COVID-19 pandemic situation, but it still attracts the world's attention. This exhibition showcases the best and strongest of XCMG. To take lead in the ever-competitive market, XCMG must be consistent and persistent in quality and innovation and remain at the forefront of technological development.
And in China, the mining equipment companies are ranked number 4, number 5 and number 10 in the world. And with a strong focus of AI, automation, world-class production facilities, new battery technology, alternate fueling such as hydrocarbons and hydrogen, we see a very strong growth position for mining equipment companies, but also a focus on customization of their machines for the customers globally, and of course their globalization strategy.
And moving on now, the coronavirus pandemic has decimated one of New York City's biggest revenue generators, its tourism sector. The number of visitors to the Big Apple has dropped by roughly 2/3 this year, and it will be years before it fully recovers. Here's Karina Huber reporting.
New York City attracted a record 66.6 million visitors in 2019, generating close to $72 billion in revenue. At the beginning of 2020, New York was on track to match or beat that record. Then the global pandemic hit. New York became the epicenter of the crisis. Its hospitals were overwhelmed, and the city that never sleeps came to a virtual standstill. Half a year later, Broadway theaters remain closed, as do many other cultural venues. Nevertheless, some tourists have returned, albeit in a trickle, not a flood.
I always wanted to see New York, but it was just a little pricey for me, so I checked online, checked for flight ticket and hotels. Everything seems like it was cheaper. That's why I was like, let's just take the risk. But it's not a risk anymore.
After feeling trapped in her home office for 8 months, Ravina Narketi flew from Texas to rendezvous with friends.
It's a wonderland for us, especially for tourists. We just see the city on TV screens, and now finally when we can visit it, it's like we feel really good.
In 2020, the city expects to receive about 1/3 of the visitors that came last year.
Under normal circumstances, New York City is one of the world's top tourist destinations, and its economy relies heavily on the revenue generated by visitors. Before the pandemic shutdowns this spring, the hospitality industry accounted for roughly 400,000 New York City jobs in industries ranging from Broadway productions to hotels, bars, restaurants, and retail.
Many hotels and restaurants catering primarily to tourists have closed. Countless workers have lost their jobs. It could be a while before they come back. The city's tourism promotion agency says once a vaccine is widely distributed, the number of visitors will pick up, but they won't likely return to pre-pandemic levels until 2025.
So domestic travel should recover around 2023, and the international piece should recover in 2024 or 2025. The business travel piece is going to take a little longer to recover. The leisure piece will come back much quicker in this particular case.
It's going to be a long time before New York City gets back on track. But the tourism industry has overcome previous setbacks like 9/11, the financial crisis of 2008, and Hurricane Sandy to re-emerge stronger than ever. The hope is that it will do that again this time. Karina Huber, CGTN, New York.
Now, during this year's Double 11 shopping festival, Pop Mart, one of China's leading companies in designer toys, recorded revenue of over $21.6 million from its Tmall store. Nearly 100 different designer toys each range in sales of at least $152,000 during the shopping event. Two collectors discussed the appeal of such toys with our reporter Zhang Hong.
Designer toys are collectibles created by artists and often made from vinyl. With pop culture motifs that are usually limited editions, most of these toys are quite expensive, except the figurines sold in blind boxes. Selling for about 60 yuan each, a customer doesn't know what they will get in each blind box, offering a little gamble that adds a thrill to each purchase. 22-year-old student Huang Hongxian just started buying blind boxes in July. He now has over 100.
The figurines in blind boxes are small, which make them easy to display at home. And it's not expensive, enabling me to collect a whole set. Almost all of my friends have a dozen such toys. Collecting them has become a hobby, and it makes me happy.
Huang said he spends about 10% of his part-time job salary on the toys, so the purchases fit comfortably into his budget. While the affordable blind boxes have ignited enthusiasm among young collectors, some veteran collectors scout for world-famous limited edition toys such as beer bricks and claws, which are usually available overseas. Their prices range from several thousand to tens of thousands of yuan. Some collaborative toys have even fetched over 1 million yuan at auctions. 44-year-old Zhang Qing started to purchase such toys 10 years ago. He now has a massive collection and runs a toy shop, both to display his treasured toys and to sell them.
I think designer toys are products of people loving to collect things. The elder generation may prefer antiques, while many young people are drawn to street art and designer toys as furnishings for their rooms. I believe there will be more beginner and veteran collectors in the future.
No Next Company, or NNC, a designer toy trade fair organizer, said although most of its current bestsellers are imported toys, they are making an effort to incubate domestic IPs to become popular characters for toys. They are now cooperating with over 20 Chinese artists to adopt their intellectual property into toys.
A designer toy is a blend of art and toy, but I think in essence, it's still a toy, which should create feelings of nostalgia for one's childhood and people's craving for toys. Today, many Chinese collectors are buying toys designed by famous foreign artists because they think it's fashionable, but it's domestic characters that are more likely to remind people of their childhood.
A business consultant said the timing is right to promote domestic intellectual property since people are aware of such toys and have become discerning hobbyists.
The majority of consumers are young, mostly in their 20s or 30s. Domestic IPs are trendy. Many Chinese, especially young adults, appreciate characters created by domestic artists. So I think it's highly likely domestic characters will soon dominate designer toys.
On Tmall alone, sales are expected to hit 4 billion yuan this year. The entire market has soared from 6.3 billion yuan in 2015 to 20.7 billion yuan last year. It's expected to reach 26.2 billion yuan this year. Zhang Hong, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Well, let's shift focus now and take a look at commodity markets today. Oil prices mixed today, but remaining on course for a fourth straight week of gains ahead of a meeting of OPEC and its allies expected early next week. Now, sources do say OPEC Plus is leaning towards delaying next year's planned increase in oil output. Still, both Brent crude and WTI are up about 7% over the week after encouraging news on potential COVID-19 vaccines. Meanwhile, gold prices set for a third straight week of declines as growing optimism over a coronavirus vaccine drove investors into traditionally riskier assets and out of the safe haven metal. Well, let's now take a short break, still coming up on the show. We bring you a young Egyptian who develops a robot to diagnose infection.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Shishi, Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Now in Nigeria, fitness trainers are going virtual as people working from home are looking for ways to exercise in a group while observing social distancing. Personal trainers are using messaging apps to arrange people in groups where they can post meal plans and workout pictures. And of course, the participants pay to be part of that group. Here's CGTN's Alexandria Majala with the details.
Endurance, stamina, stability. 1.
Nigerian fitness coach Adedamola Ladejobi is recording one of her exercise sessions, which she will share as a workout guide to her numerous clients. Ladejobi started Ask Dams, a weight loss management consulting company, 5 years ago after struggling with her own weight and finally losing 40 kilograms. Since then, she has been coaching people all around the world virtually. But she says the number of her clients grew when the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown started.
I think the fitness industry is one of those that actually really boomed during this pandemic season. That's because a lot of people started taking their health seriously. So I'm not just talking physical health alone, even down to mental health, because a lot of people were stuck indoors. And so the wellness industry in general had a very huge increase.
Joy Mogu, an event planner, reached out for a virtual fitness group in 2019, but never went through with it. But during the pandemic and lockdowns, coupled with the need to shed some weight, she reached out to Ladejobi for a one-on-one 3-month virtual session.
For me, I feel if you're, checking in back to back, it makes me feel like, okay, this doesn't seem like I'm not seeing you. So for me, I would say everybody should jump onto the virtual weight loss program because I think it's here to stay. Because right now, the pandemic has changed a lot of things. It's not business as usual.
Her daily routine involves taking a picture of every single meal and sending to an online accountability group for vetting. A list of daily exercise routines are also outlined for her, and sometimes she gets video sessions to discuss her challenges with a coach. During the lockdowns, challenged fitness enthusiasts turned major roads in Nigeria's commercial city, Lagos, and its administrative hub, Abuja, into outdoor gyms. Hundreds of people would show up for group workouts with little concern for social distancing or the coronavirus disease. But safety eventually had to come first.
Technology has been very instrumental to the core of what I do at AskFams. And honestly, I'm so grateful to God for technology, because technology is everything right now. I'm able to do virtual trainings and all of that just from one phone call or one video call from an Instagram post or a YouTube post.
Nigeria has confirmed over 66,000 cases of the coronavirus, with more than 62,000 recoveries. But despite this feat, there are fears that there's not enough testing. Therefore, the need for virtual fitness coaching will continue to thrive. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Well, let's now move on to recent technological advancements to curb the spread of the coronavirus pandemic. A 26-year-old Egyptian inventor has successfully tested a robot which he invented to diagnose infection and post-infection medical care related to COVID-19. As CGTN's Daniela Pearson now reports, the Sera version not only has human-like features, but can also be the next step to tackling the virus.
Mahmoud El-Komi may have changed how robots play a role in our day-to-day lives. His latest invention is being trialled to test for COVID-19 by taking the temperature of patients. It also warns people if they don't wear a mask.
The robot can conduct all these accurate tests while the doctor is in another room or outside of the hospital entirely. This will definitely lead to a decrease in the infection rate among the medical staff. It will also allow us to take better blood samples and will be a little bit more accurate than the human hand.
Sera version 3 has a human-like face and head with robotic arms. Mahmoud says Sera 03 can take blood tests, perform echocardiograms and X-rays. It can also help limit exposure to infection and prevent the transmission of the virus.
The government supported my idea, but now I need them to support me in applying it to facilitate mass production and have it in all hospitals. Just like what we did here in this hospital, we can do it in all of Egypt's hospitals.
With the recent surge in COVID-19 cases amid a second wave, Mahmoud said Sera could play a huge role in curbing the spread of the virus, in turn providing a means to return to normalcy.
This invention is very important during the pandemic. It reduces the infection rate to zero since everything is automated via the robot Sera.
Sera could be the next step in curbing the spread of the coronavirus. For Mahmoud, he hopes that he could secure investments and backing to turn Sera into a worldwide production. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Well, before we leave you today, here's a quick look at currency markets. MSCI's emerging market currency index dipping 0.1% today, but it was set for its fourth straight weekly gain as riskier assets benefited from higher demand, of course spurred by positive news on COVID-19 vaccines. South Africa's rand was flat in early trading today, but it was on course to end the week higher, boosted by earlier momentum from positive developments around COVID-19. The currency has risen about 1.4% this week, building on gains from growing global risk appetite. And finally, Nigeria's Naira crashed to a new low at the black market as exchange rate closes in on 500 Naira per dollar. On the official markets, the Naira is hovering around 380 to 390 Naira per dollar. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.